Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 6 of the Director series. And today's episode is Flashes of Greatness. Now, this is a suitably vague subject. These are directors that have possibly made masterworks, possibly multiple masterworks, or have shown glimpses of masterworks. I told you it was suitably vague. For length purposes, I've made a list of 25 directors, but I do realise there could be so many more. There's probably directors that I'll have missed or completely forgotten about. In some cases, it's because I'm either not that big a fan of them, or I just haven't seen enough of their work. Now, the last episode, episode 7, will be Next Level. So, for example, John Ford, who a lot of people might have in their Next Level category, I don't actually have him in any category, even though if I was actually thinking about it, I should have him in under review. I haven't seen a lot of John Ford films simply because a lot of them starred John Wayne, and I can't stand John Wayne. So obviously things like My Darling Clementine, The Grapes of Wrath, are fantastic films. But I haven't really seen a lot of John Ford, so that's why he doesn't appear on any of the lists. Granted, if I had to do these videos again, there might be different names on the lists, but hey ho. This was kind of a series to give an overview of some directors, and then I may do a top 25 directors as of like May 2019, but by the time I get through my backlog, it would be interesting to see how that top 25 looks, say, a year from now. So we'll do episode 6 today, then hopefully next week I'll do episode 7, and then at the end of episode 7 I'll maybe announce a couple of video series that I'm going to launch. One which is about as vague and random as the director series, and the other one I would like to focus on one director and just go through the films that I have seen of his, just in a video series, but I'll keep that name under wraps until the end of episode 7. I don't want to give out any spoilers. So let's go through these. I've attempted to kind of group them into directors that kind of go together, even though you might think they don't. So let's just get started. Hopefully this video won't take too long to get through. And the first director, who for me has shown flashes of greatness, is Michael Haneke. This is a Moor. He also did Funny Games, which is a wonderful film on the nature of cinematic violence, and was actually inspired by Pulp Fiction, allegedly, when the guy gets his head blown off in the back of a car and everybody laughs. That kind of disturbed Michael Haneke, and Funny Games was actually his reaction to that, allegedly. Some of his films, like The White Ribbon, I've never really got why that's so good. But other films like The Piano Teacher, there is something quite interesting about Michael Haneke, and he's shown flashes of greatness. Moving on, Pasolini. This is the knockabout comedy Salò. Yep. Pasolini with Theorem, his Earthy trilogy, the Decameron, Arabian Nights and Canterbury Tales. Very interesting film director. His films might not necessarily be completely successful in what he's trying to do, but you know that there's something great in there somewhere. So that's why he's on this list. The next series of directors are Frenchmen. I think France is probably my second favourite cinematic country behind Japan. Because when you do actually think of the number of great French films, it's quite impressive. So the first French director is Jean-Pierre Melville. This is Les Samurai on Criterion, which is a masterpiece. I did struggle with which category to put him in, because his films are quite fantastic. Bob Le Flambeur, Le Doulos, Une Flic. His kind of post-war French noirs, heavily inspired by gangster films, Hollywood gangster films of the 30s and 40s, but he put a uniquely French twist on them, and An Army of Shadows as well, which is a wonderful film about the resistance, World War II. You know you're in the hands of somebody who knows what he's doing. Le Samurai is just a wonderful fatalistic, nihilistic film, and it's one of my personal favourites. Yeah, Jean-Pierre Melville. If you haven't seen his films, there's a very nice BFI box set on Blu-ray, which you should severely check out. The next one is Francois Truffaut. Now again, some people might have him in Next Level, but I haven't seen all of his films yet, so that's why he's just in flashes of greatness. This is Finally Sunday with Fanny Ardant and Jean-Louis Trintignant. I butchered his name. This is one of my favourite films of all time. It's a noir comedy. It's actually Truffaut's final film, and it's just fantastic. The two leads are wonderful. I'm probably going to have to do a random review in this because it's just so good. Obviously Truffaut's more famous for other films like 400 Blows, Shoot the Piano Player. Again, I have the Studio Canal box set, and again I just haven't seen enough of his films, but the ones I have seen I really like, apart from Zazie dans le métro, which I really don't like. That's Truffaut. Moving on is Claude Chabrol. Now Claude Chabrol, I think, is kind of unfairly known as kind of the French Hitchcock, or ripping off Hitchcock. Again, I probably haven't seen enough of his films, so his ranking certainly may change, but the films that I have seen of his are wonderful. Le Boucher is one of my favourite films of all time, with Stéphane Audran. Also Le Biche, Le Beau Serge, Beast Must Die. They're all quite fantastic. Sadly, his films are bereft of Blu-ray releases for some reason. Again, there's 2 Arrow box sets on DVD that I would recommend to people picking up. This one has 2, 4, 6 films, and I think the other one has 6. That's a good dozen of his films to check out, and I would highly recommend them. The next one is Alain Resnais. This is Last Year at Marienbad and Criterion, with embossed type that you might not actually be able to read. Again, this is one of my favourite films of all time. It's open to so much interpretation. Again, Resnais is one of those guys that might be on next level, but again, I just haven't seen enough of his films. Last Year at Marienbad's a masterpiece. Night and Fog's a masterpiece. Hiroshima Mon Amour is really, really good. And my personal favourite is Mon Oncle Amerique, which for me might be in my top 10 films of all time. It's just an absolute masterpiece, but again, sadly, it's not available on Blu-ray, which is kind of criminal. But again, I haven't seen enough of his films to put him in next level. But the ones I certainly have seen, he's made 2 or 3 great ones. But Providence I haven't seen for a long time, and there's lots of other ones, because he made films up until the 80s or 90s, I think. I've got Life of Riley, which is in my backlog. So that's Alain Resnais, and I probably need to watch more of his films. So the next one is Jacques Tourneur. This is the Indicator wonderful release of Night of the Demon. Jacques Tourneur, with Val Newton as producer, made a lot of just wonderful, atmospheric, shoestring films, but you'd never think so, like Cat People, I Walked with a Zombie, Night of the Demon, and others. One of the examples of a filmmaker that can do great things with less. So maybe not, certainly not a next level director, but certainly well deserving of flashes of greatness. I'm sure he'll be very pleased hearing that, whatever it is. The next Frenchman is Clouseau of Diabolique, which is a masterpiece, and Wages of Fear, amongst several others. Everybody's favourite Misanthrope. Again, you could argue misogynist, thoroughly not a nice bloke, allegedly, but he made some really beautiful, cold, heartless films, and that's all you can ask for. And the last Frenchman on this list is Georges Franju. This is Les Yeux Sans Visage, Eyes Without a Face, which is just wonderful. I remember seeing this late at night in BBC Two, and blown away by it. It's just so poetic and beautiful. His documentary, Le Sang de Bête, Blood of the Beasts, about an abattoir, is just one of the greatest documentaries of all time. He also did Judex, which is fantastic, and Nuit Rouge, which which is awesome, and Spotlight and a Murderer, which is very good. So again, not quite next level, but still very good. The next guy is somebody who I've kind of separated on his own, and it's Sam Peckinpah. This is Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. It's apologies to subscriber Ben. I still haven't got around to watching this and watching all the extras, because it's got a ton of extras on it. Obviously Peckinpah, famous for Straw Dogs and The Wild Bunch, and being drunk on most of his sets, and also Billy the Kid and Pat Garrett. Yeah, one of those directors, his films might not be completely great, but there's certainly a ton of greatness within them. They might be a bit sloppy at times, but there's certainly much to be enjoyed and admired within those slightly sloppy ones. So the next two may be controversial. The first one is Jean Renoir, who, yes, is French, but he got into a separate category. Jean Renoir is really in this list because I haven't seen enough of his films. Obviously, Rules of the Game, The Grand Illusion, La Bête Humaine, Partie de Champagne. I'm butchering the titles today. But again, I probably haven't seen Lower Depths as well. I haven't seen probably enough of his films, so that's why he's in Flashes of Greatness, which I know might be controversial, but probably not as controversial as the next one. It's Hitchcock. I was actually tempted to put Hitchcock in as Solid Technicians, because for me, Hitchcock films in general are technically brilliant, but have no heart whatsoever, and are cold. It's funny because people like Kubrick, and to a certain extent Cronenberg, kind of get criticised for making kind of cold technical films, but they've got way more heart than Hitchcock films do. I have The Wrong Man, mainly for Henry Fonda. I have Dial M for Murder, mainly for Ray Milland. I like Shadow of a Doubt for Joseph Cotten. But a lot of his films just leave me cold. I've never been a fan of Psycho. North by Northwest just isn't that good. Yes, I have to reassess Vertigo. I've still got that in my backlog to reassess. I promised several people I would do that. But for me, Hitchcock shows flashes of greatness, but for me personally, and I know he's on everybody's favourite directors list, and directors have him on their greatest directors lists, but this is just me personally speaking, and he's just not to my taste. Moving on, Alexandro Jodorowsky. Now, this is Santa Sangre, which is probably his most focused film as far as narrative is concerned. What do you say to somebody who's never seen a Jodorowsky film? Prepare yourself, probably. Arrow Video announced that this year they're releasing a box set of Jodorowsky on Blu-ray, which I'm very excited about. Holy Mountain, which is a masterpiece and one of the greatest statements on cinema itself, I believe. And when they come out, I'll be doing random reviews on them. El Topo, and Fando and Lease, which I haven't actually seen. But his later films, Endless Poetry, they're seen to be believed. Now, recently Arrow released The Grand Duel, spaghetti western with Lee Van Cleef. In the UK version, they've cut a horse fall. In the US version, they've left it uncut. So one of the things about Jodorowsky films, there is a lot of dead animals. So I'm just wondering how Arrow are going to actually release them. There's a scene in El Topo where Jodorowsky's character kind of walks into this enclosure and there's hundreds of dead rabbits, and I've got a feeling those were dead rabbits. In his other films, there's animal death in quite well, not a lot of his films, but certainly they appear. So it'll be interesting to actually see what kind of versions Arrow actually release. If they're cutting horse falls, for example. Anyway, Jodorowsky is some kind of genius or just completely up his own bottom. Depends on your viewpoint. But certainly a filmmaker that needs to be seen to be believed. So the next guy who's flashes of greatness is Dario Argento. This is The Bird with the Crystal Plumage. I've yet to do my top 10 Argento, even though I still think Bird with the Crystal Plumage might be my favourite, just because it was the first one that I saw, and the kind of plot twist in it still puts a smile on my face. Argento, for me, you could argue in the solid technician list, but for me he does have flashes of greatness. You could argue perhaps he hasn't made too many truly great films, but I think the flashes are there to warrant being on this list. And the next one, yes, is another Frenchman, but this is in the Argento Jodorowsky range. Jean-Pierre Jeunet, whose films that I love, obviously apart from Alien Resurrection. They're always a visual feast for the eye. He loves his browns and his greens. Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, Amelie, Very Long Engagement, which bizarrely is I think is the only one that can't get in Blu-ray. And even the Adventures of T.S. Spivet. I haven't heard much about him since his T.S. Spivet film, but one of the fantastical kind of in that Terry Gilliam phase. I probably should actually mention Terry Gilliam, who I've now completely forgotten but actually deserves to be on this list, with Jean-Pierre Jeunet, Argento and Jodorowsky. Terry Gilliam, that's now 26. I apologise for saying he's 25. Brazil's a masterpiece, and his other films are very good generally, even though I've never been a fan of Time Bandits. That's just me. But 12 Monkeys, Terry Gilliam actually deserves to be on this list, because I haven't put him on any other lists, and he's certainly not next level. So Terry Gilliam. So the next one is not popular to say so anymore, but Woody Allen. This is Broadway Danny Rose. Woody Allen has made a lot of films that I really like, and some that I really love, but we're not really allowed to talk about him anymore, are we? And the next guy is Bill Forsyth. People might say this is a bit high for Bill Forsyth, but Housekeeping is a very good film. Local Hero is a masterpiece. Again, can somebody please release that on Blu-ray? Gregory's Girl is just one of the greatest films about being young and awkward. Comfort and Joy, That Sinking Feeling. So certainly not, a next level director, but I think he deserves to be in this next level down. People might argue that, but so the next two are kind of older Hollywood. First one is Ernst Lubitsch, creator of The Lubitsch Touch. This is To Be or Not to Be, which is fantastic. It's one of my favourite films of all time. I try not to say that about every single film that I talk about, but To Be or Not to Be is one of my favourite films of all time. He also did Heaven Can Wait, the original, with I've completely blanked on his name, starring Laird Krieger. If you haven't seen my video about Laird Krieger, please check that one out. And he also did Shop Around the Corner, which again isn't in Blu-ray. Can somebody please remedy that, if anybody's listening? Again, I haven't seen a ton of Lubitsch, but what I've seen, he has the ability to create gold. And the next one is Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life. Even though it might be a cliche to have Capra in this kind of list, he kind of deserves to be, because he has made some stone cold classics, and he might not be in that top tier of next level guys, but he's certainly very, 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 very good. And the next bunch kind of are all about the same age, and they're all about for one of the most recognisable kind of groups or waves of directors. So we'll start. Nope, sorry, I've completely messed that up. I'm a little bit early. This is Sidney Lumet, it's Anderson Tapes, who has made more great films than you actually realise. It's only when you look at his career you actually realise what a great career he had. From 12 Angry Men onwards, he made lots of different films, and he made them of generally a really good quality. So that's Sidney Lumet. The next one is Jules Dassin, who for years I actually thought was French, but he's actually American. This is Rififi, the famous French robbery film. He made Night in the City, Thieves Highway, just so many noirs, and some just very good films. He made Brute Force, prison film with Burt Lancaster. So again, not necessarily a guy that deserves to be in the top of the top, but certainly a very good director. So finally, let's get to that group of American directors that I was talking about prematurely. Let's start with Paul Schrader. This is his blistering debut, Blue Collar. And every time I show it, I say, if you've never seen it, go buy it instantly. It's one of the greatest debuts of all time. It's right up there with Citizen Kane as far as debuts. Paul Schrader made challenging films, interesting films, socio-political films. Obviously had a partnership with Scorsese and co-wrote a lot of Scorsese's best work. but not necessarily, he's certainly not a next level guy, but a very, very, very good one. The next one is Brian De Palma. Again, some people might argue De Palma should be in Solid Technicians because his films are very technically minded and technically proficient. But again, it's a guy that always makes interesting films. They might not always be successful, but they're always thought-provoking and challenging, sometimes controversial. So that's why he's on this list. And the next guy is Martin Scorsese. This is Age of Innocence, which I think is arguably his best film. Nobody else does, but never mind. Scorsese is not a next level guy. The second half of his career, even though I haven't seen every single thing he's done, has been patchy at best. And his first half, I think looking back on it, some of them haven't aged as well. You know, a lot of people will say he's made, 5 masterpieces or whatever. I think that's a little high. And again, I used to absolutely love Scorsese. He was arguably my second favourite director for a good few years. But his lustre has somewhat fallen off for me for various reasons. But he's certainly a director with flashes of greatness. Maybe not so much now, but certainly in his body of work. And finally, you'll be relieved to hear the last director is Francis Ford Coppola. And anybody who watches my videos knows I was going to be holding up Gardens of Stone. Certainly not The Godfather. Coppola was one of the movie brats. Obviously Spielberg and John Milius as well, but they don't feature on any of my lists. And Coppola obviously broke through with the Godfather films, Apocalypse Now, but for me it's these smaller films like Gardens of Stone, like The Conversation, that are his most interesting. Again, he's a guy that might not have done very interesting work in the last 20 years or so, but I think he still deserves to be in the flashes of greatness section, just for his first 20 years of his career. So that's the end of the list, you'll be thankful to know. Please let me know in the comments below who should be on this list, who shouldn't be on the list, who I've completely forgotten about or ignored. Again, most of that will be my own ignorance, or just because I haven't watched enough of their films to put them in that category. And thanks very much for watching. So the last episode of this series will be episode 7, which is next level directors, which should be an interesting list. And then I will attempt to do a top 25 as of May 2019, and then by the time I get through my backlog, I'll do another one in 6 months or a year, and then we'll see whether it's changed much. So thank you very much for watching and bearing with, and this is Solitude saying I hope you have a good evening.